Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirit is back. This is Brett. Got another great episode for you. Sat down with a new friend, Gary Harmon, and we had a really fun chat. Very, very interesting. Had a great time. So I hope that you'll enjoy our conversation. As always, if you want to be on the show, please contact me at seekingOurSpirit@gmail.com. That's also to talk to me about spiritual direction. We're on YouTube as well now, so go and subscribe over there. Even if you don't listen to the show on YouTube, that helps us out. Appreciate all the support. Keep liking and sharing and hitting all those good buttons. I really appreciate it. If you want to call in and tell a story and not be on the show, you can call and leave a message at 615-933-9737. So hope to hear from y'all, and we'll keep moving. Oh, and you can find Gary on his YouTube channel at Harmon Speaks. That's Harmon Speaks. Enjoy. So we're rolling. Gary, Mr. Gary Harmon.
Yes, sir.
Good to have you and to meet you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I'm always touched and encouraged by folks coming forward when they don't know me from Adam and just coming to chat. So thanks so much for being willing.
You are very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
As always, why don't we just start off and have you just tell the folks who you are, what you do, that kind of thing, just bio.
Sure. What I do is as little as possible. I am
my man.
Yeah. Well, I'm married, so I don't get away with that much, but I try. I am been in Knoxville since I went to UT.
Okay.
I moved here from Clarksville, Tennessee, and I am a retired teacher. I was an English, U.S. history, creative writing, and French teacher.
Oh, nice.
Throughout my career. But really what I taught was be in my room on time, don't touch that girl, and face the front. Those are the things I actually taught.
That's good. Life lessons for sure.
Yeah, well, they were.
Yeah.
They were going to have to be on a job site on time anyway, so I tried my best to teach that.
Nice.
After I retired, I decided that what I wanted to do is give back a little bit. I feel like a life that you keep is not a life worth having. If you're not giving it away, what's the point?
Yeah.
And so I got involved with a little group called Spark. It works with people with disabilities. They help them get mobility equipment. They help the blind use computers, sight impaired, I apologize, they use computers, and help people with disabilities who need help with whatever they need help with.
Yeah. And
I like doing that work.
Great. And you were telling me offline, you're sort of the spokesperson.
Yeah, that's a misnomer, but because I said that, and that's not true. But I do the speaking.
Okay.
For whatever you want to call that job. Yeah. We get classes from colleges locally who will come in who want to work, usually with occupational therapy, and they're going to be working with people like me, and I give them an idea of what our lives are like and how we think. I had a group come in not long ago, and a young man in the class said, "What do we always do wrong?" And I thought that was an insightful question for a kid who didn't know anything. And so I said, you start helping us before you talk to us. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, if you don't know my story, you don't know what I need.
Yeah.
And you don't know why I need it. If I came into you and said I needed help moving around, and you start trying to train me to climb Mount LeConte, I'd pull you aside and say, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
My family has done that, and God bless them.
Yeah.
I'm glad they had a good time. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Everest.
Yeah, I'm not going to go up any incline.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If it's got roots and rocks, count me out.
Yeah.
But if you don't know me, you don't know that.
Yeah, right.
So getting to know the patient is the first point.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do that kind of thing.
Wonderful. That's well, I'm jumping ahead, but I'll tell you a little bit later. That's peer tutoring experience in high school for me was one of the most formative experiences I've ever had.
Is that right?
Yeah, and we can talk more about that. But why don't you, just since you mentioned it, and we're only audio, you want to tell folks a little bit about your disability?
I can do that. Yeah. Excuse me. During my mother's pregnancy, she experienced something called amniotic band syndrome. And what happens is the amniotic sac is made of 2 layers, and it looks like a clear plastic bag, but it's 2 layers. And for whatever reason, and doctors still don't know, sometimes the interior layer shreds. And if the outer layer shreds, I don't make it.
Right.
Because that's where the fluid stays, and that's how the baby survives.
Right.
But if the interior layer shreds, it shreds like little bands that get into the fluid and start floating around. And my mother, who had a great sense of humor, would always say, and of course you couldn't leave anything alone. So I started grabbing at them and playing with them, and they wrapped around my arms and my legs. And my right arm comes to a point where the wrist bone would be. If I had a hand, it would sit right here. Right? My left hand has a thumb and a pinky. Those are my only 2 fingers. And they do pinch, just to make that clear. And I don't have feet. I have legs, I have heels and ankles, but I don't have the foot part.
Okay.
And whenever a limb is affected where the ending isn't there, it's shorter than most people would be.
Okay.
So when the doctors decided my height, they built prosthetics to make me the height that I should have been. Okay. If I took these off and stood up, I'd be about 5'3".
Oh, and so your prosthetics go up above the knee?
They do. Okay. Yeah, they go up to the audience can see this, but up to my knee. Yeah. And the ankle part and the foot is all added on. Yeah. That's not any of me. Wow. I'm inside a container. Yeah. It's just flesh colored. And you can tell where I end in the prosthetic stuff. Yeah. Now, the cool thing about this, I can walk across campfires. As long as it's only ember. Yeah. If it's flame, I'm in trouble. Yeah. But I can't do that. I did it as a Boy Scout, scared kids to death.
Now, just a follow-up question on that. So, how old were you when you got the prosthetics?
I was 2 when I got my first pair.
Okay.
They weren't made out of, these are acrylic and fiberglass and God only knows what all. Yeah. But when I first got them, they were just a pair of baby shoes with a strip of leather wrapped into a circle, and it had a lace on the front. And Mom put my little leg in the shoe, and I could stand up and walk in it.
Wow, man.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, yeah. Another follow-up question. So this condition that happens, right, the layer breaks. Right. So then when that happens, it really just depends, like what is affected on an individual really just depends on,
it's
like
all
you said,
accident.
if the baby is, so it could be anything.
If I minded my business, it'd probably be fine. Yeah. But no, I had to get involved with it and start playing with the strips. And of course, at that point, you don't even know what you're doing. But I did explain to my mother it was purely accidental. But it wasn't something that would happen twice the same way with 2 babies.
Yeah, that's what's interesting.
And I also was a little interested to find out if there was something genetic that would cause that. Right. And when I got married to the most perfect mother on the planet, I got lucky with my wife. We went to a geneticist. Yeah. And before we went in, I said, okay, if we find out they're going to be like me, what do you want to do? And she said, we'll still have them. Yeah. I just want to be prepared. Yeah. So I knew I made the right choice. So we went in and sat down, and she said, how did you get to be a grown man and not know what caused it? Well, my doctors tried to tell me as a kid, but every time they'd start doing it, my mother looked upset. And so I pulled the doctor aside and I said, look, if she thinks she's done something, let's not stress her out.
Yeah.
We'll find out some other day.
Yeah.
So my wife and I found out it was not genetic.
Okay.
And we have kids with all kinds of fingers and toes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many y'all are supposed to have, but they wiggle them all over the place. So.
Yeah. How old are they now?
Too dang old, and it's because my wife keeps feeding them. It makes me angry. My oldest is 22 now, and my youngest is 18.
Okay, cool.
And he just turned 18 he'll be 19 in the summer.
Yeah.
But he just realized he's a grown man now, and he can make his own decisions. Except he doesn't live on his own. He doesn't know how to cook.
Yeah,
so.
Still got to work that out.
And like Daddy, he likes food.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Okay, well, great. Well,
we're still in charge.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So as you know a little bit, so this show is really an exploration into what do we mean when we say spirituality.
Okay.
I know you shared with me you come out of the Presbyterian church, but
right.
That word to me, we throw that word around all the time. But what does it mean? And so what I try to do is see what spirituality means to Gary through your life story. Okay. Right? So when you think about, that word in your life, which to me means basically, relationship with God or experience of the holy, right? Sacred. Right. Where do you enter into that? Is that childhood? Is it through the church? Is it personal and experiential? Yeah. What's your kind of...
Well, it was not a straight line for me.
Never is.
Yeah, I hope not, because I sure didn't do it.
Yeah.
And one thing I would explain, and it's something that I don't run away from. I talk about it. My father was very violent, especially with me. Oh. He was a Marine drill instructor before I was born. He was out of that by the time I got here. But he wanted a Marine baby, you know. I think he was going to put in camo diapers and have me long-range shooting people. But I didn't turn out to be that guy. Yeah. And when he saw I had a disability, he was ready to go home. Wow. He was not into it. And my mother pulled him aside and said, I can do this. I love my baby. Yeah. My mother was a rock. Yeah. And she told him that it's going to be okay. Don't give up. And everything about me, when I was, especially as a kid, drove him crazy. Mm-hmm. He would just really get very, very angry. Mm-hmm. And the one incident that I think about a lot, when I was about 4, I had this bad habit of crying every time we went home. Hmm. And I guess it was because I knew Dad was angry with me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to be a great night. Yeah, I don't know, because I don't remember my thought patterns. Yeah, but I do know that I would usually cry on the way home, and it drove him crazy. He hated it when I would cry. Yeah, and so one night we arrived at our house, and he asked my mother to get my older sister and go in the house. He said we'd be in the moment. Yeah. And Mom was worried. She wanted to know why we were going to be outside. He said, don't worry about it. Go on inside. And she began to cry, but she did. She went inside. And then my dad got me out of the back of the car. And I didn't know what we were doing, but he was carrying me somewhere. And he never did that. So
and you're how old?
I was 4.
Okay.
He had me. He was carrying me. And instead of going to the house, he went the other direction. And he took me to a barn that was near our home. Uh-huh. And the barn was set up with stalls where we put cattle before we took them to slaughter. And he put me in the stall, and he said, now, out here, you can scream all you want. Nobody's going to hear you, and I'll get a little bit of peace and quiet. And he closed the door, and he locked it. He started chuckling as he walked back to the house. And he got to the house, went in the door, shut the door, and turned out the light. So there I was in this dark barn, crying like a banshee.
4 years old.
At 4 years old.
Jeez.
Yes. And there was a dog with their puppies in there, and they were jumping all over me. And once I realized they were dogs, I was fine. Yeah. But at first, I didn't know what they were. So I was
Did you have
terrible.
your prosthetics?
Yes, I did. And I also used to wear a hook on my arm. And I was like, don't hit the dog. It's just the dog. Yeah. It's going to be okay. So I'm standing by the door crying. And I finally ran out of crying. Yeah. I just stopped. And I remember I did go to church. We were church people. Went to a little Methodist church, actually, in that neighborhood. And I still love that little place. But they didn't know this was happening or didn't want to know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
I've never asked them as an adult. But I started thinking, if this is what God does to babies, I don't want anything to do with it.
For sure.
And I was ready to write it off.
Yeah.
I was like, no. But he got me out in about an hour. I was alive. I was fine. And, you know, there was no counseling in the 60s.
Right.
There was nobody I could go talk to about it. So I would wound up back at church where I knew people, and it was friendlier. And Dad had to be nice when he was at church.
Yeah.
So thank you, churches. And so I started going back to church, but I kept thinking, you know, I was really in a desperate need there, and I needed somebody.
Yeah.
And when I got to be college age, I came here to UT, and there was a minister at the Wesley Foundation there named Bob Parrott. And Bob Parrott is one of the finest men I ever knew. And I told him this story one day. And I talked about how God didn't answer my prayer. And I just kind of gave up on him. Mm-hmm. And he sat there for a moment, and he smiled, and he said, "Hey, Gary." I said, "Yeah, Bob?" And he said, "You're not in the stable anymore." Mm. And I said, "Yeah, but I had to," and he said, I'm not saying that you didn't have to wait too long. I didn't say it wasn't cruel.
Yeah.
But you're out. You asked to get out. You're out.
Yeah.
And he said, what you've got to decide is, are you going to meet God halfway, or you want him to write the whole story?
Wow.
And then you help him.
Yeah.
And he was still too young to really understand what that meant. But it finally dawned on me that God helps out, but you've got to be a part of it. You've got to be part of the solution even. And so we started talking more, and it became more important in my life.
Yeah.
And then I was teaching, and I had some students who went to this weird little Presbyterian church here in Knoxville, mm-hmm. and they kept inviting me to go. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, okay. And I finally gave up. And I said, if I go, will you quit bothering me about it? And they said, yeah. So I went, and I loved it.
Yeah.
I liked what they said. I liked what they were about. And I went back the second time, and I went to a little Sunday school class, and I looked across the room, and I saw the cutest pair of legs I'd ever seen in my life. And I wound up marrying that little gal, and we have 2 kids. And we, 32 years later, are still hanging on.
Yeah.
So if that's not predestination, I'm not sure what is. Yeah. So I said, okay, this will work for me, and I stayed. So that's where my faith comes from.
Yeah.
And I do believe God listens. I think he talks to us. Mm-hmm. I don't think we listen very often.
No.
But he does talk to us, and I do hear him every now and then.
Yeah, yeah.
Not because I listen better, but because he wears me down.
Yeah.
And then he gets through. Go ahead.
What now this is a random aside, but that Bob Parrott person, did he work? Was he a minister?
He was a minister.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't minister.
No, you may have. I just was curious.
Yeah, he was the minister at the Wesley Foundation.
Okay.
Yes, he was.
I knew a wonderful man named Bob Parrott as well. Okay. So I just was making sure it wasn't the same person, but he was not a minister. So, okay. Well, so that is there any? So child. I mean, those were big, long strokes, right? Like, is there anything else that you would point to in childhood or adolescence in terms of spirituality, or was it really just survival? Like you're, sort of as it's.
Well, it's mostly survival, but
yeah.
I have, I think, 2 big stories that come out of my youth.
Okay.
I've written a book about this, by the way, just so you'll know.
Yeah.
But
where can people find that?
It can be found on Amazon.com.
Okay.
And it's called Clown and Cobwebs.
Clown and
Nice
Cobwebs.
title, isn't it?
It is good.
Thank you. And I have a pen name because the people in the book are real people, so I had to change everybody's name. And it's under the name Walt Nelson.
Okay. Clown and Cobwebs.
Clown and Cobwebs.
Walt Nelson.
Walt Nelson. It's a memoir about my relationship with my father.
Okay.
And in the book, what you see is we kind of slowly change physicians.
Wow.
As he gets old and frail,
Yeah.
then I become the one that has to decide how he's going to be treated.
Wow.
And fortunately, I'd opened up my heart, and God was saying, you cannot do what he did.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And I wouldn't want to.
Wow, man.
So, that's what the book is about. I will tell you one other incident. I just think it's formulaic for my personality. When I was 9, I had surgery on both of my legs. And I was in casts that would slip up and down my leg because I didn't have a foot that would stop them. And when they would get to a certain point, they would hurt. Mm-hmm. And it happened mostly when I was in bed. I'd roll around a lot, and the cast would slip down, and it would hurt. And I learned to cry while I was still asleep. And so I would cry when they hurt. And my dad worked nights, and he would come in about 3 in the morning. He was exhausted. He wanted to go to sleep. And there was the fat kid crying. And he would say that. And he would come in and wake me up and tell me to stop that and, do this and that. And when I kept doing it, he would up the ante. And one day he woke me up by strangling me. And it scared me to death. And he said, he stopped. He said, I'm not going to kill you. But tomorrow night, if I come in and you're in my house asleep, I will. Tomorrow night will be your day. And he got up, went to bed, and I didn't go back to sleep, of course. And I spent all of the next day wondering where I was going to sleep. I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
What was I going to do? And I thought, well, we'll go to New York, and I'll be discovered, and I'll be an actor. And then I realized I couldn't afford to go to New York, so I couldn't do that. And the next night, when my mom got home, I was just a mess.
Yeah.
And I was like, and she said, that's just your dad being mad.
Yeah.
You're going to go home and go to bed in your own bed. It's going to be fine. And I went home. I went to bed. And I was 9 years old. I fell asleep. That's what kids do. And I got awakened by my father. He came home. And I won't get into a lot of detail, but he woke me. Let's just put it that way. And next thing I knew, we were up in the air. And he was carrying me across the house. And we went out the side door of the house. And it had been snowing that night. There was about a half an inch of snow on the ground. And he carried me out to a little hill and sat me in the snow. And it was cold, it was scary, and I was crying, and he's like, you can just cool off, and I'll come get you later. Went back in the house, turned off the light, went to bed. And I sat out there. I'm not proud of this, but I screamed like a banshee as long as I could.
Sure.
And then something weird happened to me, and this is the reason I'm telling you the story.
Yeah.
I calmed down, and I didn't know how to pray at 9 years old, but I realized that crying was prayer. Mm. As I've learned as an adult, that's true.
Yeah.
And I learned that God's listening whether I ask him to or not, because I learned 3 things that night that I didn't know at the beginning of the evening. The first thing that I had to admit to myself was I have a high tolerance for cold. As I was sitting there, no coat on, I was in my pajamas, and it was snowing on me. It was gathering on me. Yeah. And it didn't bother me. It was okay. And the second thing that I realized is that when you cry around a guy like my dad, you're feeding him. Mm. And he likes that. Mm. It gives him energy, and he becomes meaner because you're feeding him than he is when he's hungry. Mm. And so I made a pledge to myself I would never shed a tear in front of him again. Wow. I never did.
What a thing to realize at 9.
Well, the next one's better. The third one, and I do believe God urged me to say this out loud, is my dad doesn't love me. I had to say that out loud because that's not going to change. Yeah. We weren't going to be able to renegotiate that or work it out. And what my mom always wanted is for me to grow up and walk up and go, hey, Dad, and put my arm around his shoulder. Don't worry, we're good. You don't do that. That's not normal.
Yeah.
Nobody feels that way. I don't wish him any ill will. Yeah. But we were, and he's gone now. It's too late to repair that anyway. But it was never going to get better. It was never going to get better. Right. So realizing that gave me power. Mm-hmm. When my dad came back out, I don't know how much longer. It seemed like a week, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. And he came out and he said, "Are you ready to come in?" I said, "If you want me to." Notice that little teenage swagger, right? And I knew that would kind of make him angry. It was like, "Oh, so you're good here." And I said, "I can survive it."
Wow.
And he went out. He was mad, but he knew if he left me out too long, it would have bad consequences. So he snatched me up and took me back in the room, put me back in my room, said, "I don't want to hear any more out of you," and went to bed. And he didn't. He didn't hear any more out of me. But I had power that I didn't have before I went out. And I realized where that came from, and I thanked him for it. Mm. And we didn't have those kind of incidents again. Mm. You know, we had, I won't give details, we had a clash when I was 18, and I pushed him and then caught him, stood him upright, and I said, "You don't have permission to touch me anymore." Mm. And he looked at me and he said, "What are you going to do if I do?" And I said, "Hospitalize you." Mm-hmm. And he stopped. And he walked out of the room and turned back and looked at me and he said, "It's about damn time." Mm-hmm. So, you know, there you go.
Yeah, it's like the language he knew.
Yeah, and you know, I know these are harsh stories.
Oh, it's all right.
But this is a part of my journey.
Yeah.
And when people say, you know, "Isn't that cute? You believe in God?" No, you don't understand.
Right.
When I was in the trench, he was the one in the foxhole with me.
Yeah.
I didn't fight in the real war. I fought my dad, but he was there.
Yeah.
And he got me through it, and I know he did.
Yeah.
And I would have friends that say, "Well, if he existed, why did you have that, Dad?" Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know his purpose. Mm-hmm. I won't know that until I meet the man face to face. But and no, I don't believe God's a man. I'm sorry, but when I meet him face to face, maybe he'll explain all that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not bitter about it. I'm glad because I'm tough enough to survive now.
Yeah. Boy, man, that's heavy.
Yeah, unpack that. No. No, just kidding.
Yeah, no.
But it's all in my book. Go order it. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hope people do. That's just, boy, just not even going anywhere else. Just knowing the background and where you came from, right, and that you're seemingly a stand-up, healthy, person.
I do the best I can.
That's beautiful. I mean,
yeah. Man. Yeah, if you realize you're not alone, that's when it heals you. Yeah. You start realizing you don't have to go absolutely berserk and live in an institution. Everything's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. You've gone through the worst. The rest of it can't be that bad. Mm-hmm. And, it's like I've had lives like everybody, ups and downs.
Sure.
But I've always felt like God was there.
Yeah.
And so he's got me through it.
So then it probably would be fair to say that your spirituality, your relationship with God, as opposed to a typical story of somebody, usually they're taught in their family or in the church, and then later they buck that and find their own version of that or whatever. Right. But it came from the trenches, to use your...
I've done the work. Yeah. I did the work.
Yeah.
I also read the Bible as a teenager, which I will say was a mistake.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what I was reading.
Oh, sure.
But I went cover to cover.
Yeah.
And now as an adult, I've read that. I'm like, but I am Presbyterian, so we don't really read it anyway. I'm just kidding. The others do. I'm just the bad one. But, it's that... I wish I had studied more and knew a little bit more. But I'm not one of those guys that go around quoting scripture.
No, yeah.
But I don't need to, because I can call on my own experiences and feel like he's been there for me.
Man, I think as a priest, I'd rather someone have that perspective than be able to quote, the whole thing.
Right.
We end up treating it almost as an idol itself. And it's not. It's more of a guide. Yeah.
Yeah. My older child went through a stage, I don't know if he's still in it or not, but where he didn't believe.
Yeah.
And he came in and he was talking to me about it, and he said, does it make you mad that I don't believe? And I said, nope. And he said, why not? And I said, well, I think your relationship with God is personal.
Yeah.
And I think you'll find it when he finds you.
Yeah.
And I said, he's already found you. He already loves you. There's nothing you can do that's going to make him mad. And he's going to say, well, I wish you knew I were here.
Yeah.
Because maybe you feel a little more comfortable, but, you know, if you don't want to look, you don't have to look.
Yeah.
And I said, when you're ready, he'll be ready.
Yeah. Now, you made reference, so I like to really dig in with people on
Sure, let's go.
What does that experience actually look like? And so you made reference, and I know these are just words we use because we're talking about sort of things that are undefinable, but you said you heard him or you hear God sometimes. Is that, tell me more about that. So, and I know, I'm sorry, everyone that listens, this is annoying because I say it all the time, but I call these languages. And for me, in the ministry and in working with people and walking with people in their journeys, I've noticed that it's like there's a whole spectrum of options and ways that people can experience this creator, right? And some people just have one, as I say, language. Some people have various, some, you know. So, and hearing is definitely one of those. I would actually say it's one of the more rare ones I encounter. But so is that, describe that. Is that like audible, or what is that like?
Not really, no.
Like
but no, that's okay. Because I am a language person.
Yeah.
That's how you get to me, right? I like to argue, not to cause trouble, but to understand an issue. If you believe one side of an issue and I'm another, I don't care about how you feel or don't want you to try to convince me. I just feel like if we wrestle with it, we learn more.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm sitting there one day and I hear, Gary, yes, Lord. That's never happened to me.
Okay.
I think it was Samuel that happened to.
Some people have it, but
well, and good for them.
Yeah.
It's not like that for me.
Yeah, me either.
If I'm working through an issue and I'm thinking about it and trying to work, sometimes I feel like I'm having an idea that I didn't have before.
Yes.
And I'll go back and say, wait a minute, what was that? And I think about it. And I may bring it up in prayer. Am I hearing the right thing?
Yeah.
Is this from you? And you can't really verify that.
Sure.
I mean, you just, so.
It's a knowing.
I have a friend who laughingly calls me a prophet. I am not.
Yeah.
And I don't like him teasing about that because I think what happens to me happens to everybody, probably. That they get that little voice in the back of their head that says, you shouldn't do that. Or that is what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's just how it plays out for me.
Yeah.
But there are weird things about me that others don't. And I'm going to bring this up just because I think it'd be fun to mess up your congregation.
Okay.
I often see the dead. So that's a part of my experience.
Okay, nice. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. Where I work.
I say, how weird is that? Of course, a priest is like, yeah, nice. Let's talk about that.
Well, we believe in the Holy Ghost, so we got to believe there's a spirit.
Yeah,
right?
I have no issue with that.
And I don't understand why people think it's not, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, look, because it does. One of my favorite little stories about this, probably about a year ago now, my wife and I were asleep, and I woke up, and I have this closet in our room, and the doors were open, and a woman walked out of it and walked to the edge of my bed, and she was looking at my wife, and I looked at her and said, hello? And she kind of giggled and said, hi. And then she wasn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And I woke up my wife and I said, you're never going to believe this. Now, my wife wouldn't see a ghost if it sat in her lap and gave her a kiss on the mouth.
That's how I am.
Yeah, she would never see it. It would never happen.
Yeah.
But I saw her.
Yeah.
And she said, well, tell me what she looked like. And I did. And it turned out to be a friend of hers from high school who had died the night before.
Wow.
And I said, well, guess what? She wanted to make sure you knew she was okay.
Yeah.
So she's okay.
Yeah.
And that was good for her.
Yeah.
Because she believes it even though she can't see it and doesn't want to.
Yeah.
And thinks I am a little crazy for being able to. And that's okay, too.
That's right.
That's okay. Sanity's overrated.
I don't know where you find it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never known any sanity, so I don't care.
Yeah.
But that's been a tradition in my family for a long time.
Oh, really?
On my mother's side of the family.
Okay.
My grandmother will scare you to death telling stories that she's experienced. And one of the things I try to stress to people is she likes scaring me to death, but the real experience is not scary.
Yeah.
Because usually, if somebody's still wandering around the earth, it's because they're afraid to go.
Yeah. Maybe
they did some bad things in their life, or they don't know they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
That I've run into a few of those too. And there's always a ghost in the church.
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you that. Sure,
well, that part I can feel, yeah.
Yeah,
but
I think everybody can. If they sitting here by themselves, I know it's in here. I know that.
Yeah, I don't like being in churches by myself.
Yeah, I understand that. I helped my grandparents clean hours when I was a kid. They were the custodians, and I was in there alone all the time. And I saw them.
When did that start for you?
8 years old. Yeah.
You remember the first one?
I do. My brother and I used to share a room, and he woke up one night shaking me, going, move over, move over, move. And I moved over, and he jumped in the bed, pulled the cover over his head. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, there was an old lady in our window looking in at us, and she had a shawl pulled around her shoulders and was holding the shawl and looking. And I said, well, let me see it. And I was like, no. And he was holding the cover, please. And he lay there, and finally we fell asleep.
Yeah.
And the next morning I got up and told my mom what happened. She acted like she expected the story, which I found out later she did.
Yeah.
And she took my little brother next door and told my grandfather what had happened. And my grandfather was a very wise man. He knew everything. He went in the back of the room, got some boxes of pictures out, and he said, hey, Jimmy, that was my brother. He said, I'm going to put some pictures out. If you see the old lady, let me know. And he started sitting out all these pictures. After a few minutes, he stopped him. He said, there she is. And it was a lady with a shawl pulled around her shoulders like that. It was amazing.
Was she related to you guys?
Yeah, he was my grandfather's grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And she had told him before she died that she wanted to come back and see what happened to his family.
Yeah.
He was like 8 or 9 when she died. He was like, what family? And laughed it off. But there she was.
Man, that's awesome. I love it.
Isn't that great?
That's great stuff. My wife's family, it's really funny you mentioned the generational thing.
Right.
It really seems to be like that.
It works that way.
My wife's family's like that.
I'm going to tell you why if you want to know. When your kids are little and you're in the kitchen with your wife preparing meals or whatever, and the kid runs in and goes, hey, Dad, there's an old man in my room.
Yeah.
You go, what?
Yeah.
You get upset and you go running in because you think there's some pervert in there trying to hurt your kid, and it's empty. The room's empty. And you look around and you go, where is he? Well, he's right there. Okay, honey. All right.
Yeah.
And you pick him up, give him a hug, and say, are you hungry? Yeah. Well, let me go finish dinner. And you go back out. And a couple of days later, the old man comes back.
Yeah.
Kids do the same. And you keep going, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
There's nobody there. After a while, nobody's there.
Yeah.
And they can't see it anymore.
Yeah.
I made sure when my kids were little, they would tell me they saw something, and we went to find them.
Yeah.
And we tried to explore it and see if we could prove they were there.
Yeah.
Usually we couldn't.
Sure.
But sometimes I would see them, and sometimes I couldn't.
Yeah, that's the way you describe that is not how it has happened in my family, probably because of my wife. So
Right.
We've had those instances with our children where they've experienced something, but my wife would never reject that.
Right.
That's common to her. So she just,
that's great.
Sort of leaned into it.
Yeah. Our first child passed.
I'm
And
sorry.
thank you, he was stillborn. So we never had him in life, but I've seen him 3 times. and he comes back every now and then.
Yeah.
Twice when we were going through something kind of traumatic, and the third time just to visit.
Yeah.
And
does he come back the same always?
At what?
Does he come back the same always?
No, he ages.
Huh.
And I have a friend who does this a lot, and we talked about it. And she said, once again, God's being merciful. Mm-hmm. If he sends you a ghost baby, how are you going to react to that? Mm-hmm. Well, that'd be horrible.
Yeah.
The fact that they're a kid is bad enough.
Yeah.
But, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And one night, my wife was up with our younger son. He was having a fit about something. We don't know what, and we just couldn't calm him. And she'd stay up for an hour, then go to bed, and I'd get up for an hour, and we were trying back and forth. And fortunately, I was so bad at it, she wouldn't let me do it much. Mm-hmm. But I was lying in bed trying to think of something we could do. Mm-hmm. And I got up, went to the room, and I told her, she goes, "Thank you, Sherlock. I tried that about 4 hours ago." Okay. All right. I was trying to be helpful. And when I turned around to go back to bed, I saw him standing in the hallway. And my first thought was, he's here to get my younger son. As you've heard those stories that sometimes loved ones come and get him.
Yeah.
And I walked up to him. I was about as close as I am to him, which is to say about 5 or 6 feet. And I said, "Are you here for him?" And he suddenly looked at me like he finally saw me. Mm-hmm. He got this big smile on his face, and he nodded no. Mm. And then he was gone. Mm. And the moment he was gone, my son quit crying.
Yeah. Wow.
It was over.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. We never figured out.
Yeah.
But
you do hear that,
okay.
like a relative helping to cross over or something. Yeah.
Well, I believe that. My grandmother claimed to see my grandfather right as she was dying.
Sure.
So good for her.
Yeah. I get those stories.
I hope my deceased son comes and gets me.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Yeah.
And I pray that sometimes.
Do you have thoughts on? That's a common thing I encounter that, and I think we all do, that people will talk about how, if these experiences are real, children tend to seem to be more open to them. And then, as you said, they grow up and it goes away.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on why it goes away for some people and why
it goes
for
away
others?
For everybody sometimes?
Yeah.
No, not necessarily forever. But you get so busy in your life and doing your things, and you don't have time for
but I just mean, like, there are kids that might have those stories like you said,
right,
and then they never have anything again, versus someone like you who
life
continues.
Gets in the way.
Yeah.
It's hard to focus on ghosts when you're living life.
So do you think you think it's just that it's us not being
I do
open
as
or
I
perceptive?
go through periods where Satan could have a dance at my house and I wouldn't know it. And
it'd probably be a fun dance. Huh?
And I dance really badly, so I don't want to go anyway. But sometimes I pick up on it easily.
Yeah.
So it just depends on where you are in your life and what you're concerned about. But it can come back if you want it. And I do want to hang on to it. I don't know why, but it's important to me, and I want to do it. So.
Yeah. Well, I think it in some ways, the things we say we believe in,
right?
The experiences like that give credence to it. I mean,
right.
or even just the basic of like,
right.
There is something else.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I used to have a student, I would tell these little stories sometimes, and my student said, "That's not how it works. When you die, the door opens and you go through the tunnel, and Jesus is at the end with your family, and they greet you and you go into heaven."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay." I said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "Okay." I said, "First of all, I don't want you to believe just because I'm telling you the stories. Mm-hmm. But secondly, how many times has the door been opened and you told to go in and you didn't do it?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're out playing with your friends. It's a summer night. Your mother's trying to get you to eat dinner. She opens the door, calls your name, says, 'Get your butt in here. We need to eat.' Mm-hmm. And you keep playing with your friends because you don't want to go in yet."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, I've done that." Well, that's the thing. We're human even when we die. Mm. And sometimes the door opens and we're like, I'm not ready yet.
Right.
Or we don't recognize why the door is opening.
Yes.
And we don't want to go in yet. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to hang around a while. It's always a bad idea. Mm. You shouldn't. Go on in and you find out God is infinite love and that this was all for a reason. And whew, I mean, who wouldn't want that? But I get it. You're scared. You're not ready for that yet. Yeah. So is that possible? I see it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Man, so cool. Yeah. What do you have? Any other favorites like that you want?
Well, I try not to go to funerals. I have a few times. I can't hear them. And I find that very interesting because I'm so language oriented.
You can't hear the funeral?
No, I'm sorry. I can't hear the ghosts.
Got it. Okay.
I often see them there.
Yeah.
But I can't hear them. One time when my mother, my wife's mother died, we went to the funeral home and we stepped in and she said, "Hey, Mr. Ghost Man." She calls me that to make me mad. She goes, "Mr. Ghost Man, where's my mom?" And the guy came up to tell us where we're going. He said, "Hold on a minute. Where's my mom?" And I said, "There's a chapel over here to the left. If we go in there and look inside the room, she's actually in what looks to me like a window and standing in there looking to see who's going to come to the funeral." And I said, I don't see Oliver, just a face, and but she'll be there probably until the service starts.
Yeah.
And we went in, and she looked at the guy and goes, "Yes, ma'am, she's in there." So we went in there, and I could see her like I see you. There was no question. She was hanging in the air there in the window. And she stayed until the minister started the service. And then the window closed and there was no more Barbara. I've never seen her since. But I saw her then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Why do you say you to try not to go to funerals?
I don't like going in knowing that, for one thing, I'm going to be asked about it.
Okay.
And for another, what is he trying to say to me? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's frustrating.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It is frustrating. You have time for one more story?
Okay, yeah. I'm here.
Okay. Several years ago, I read online, I like to read about these things, that there was a hotel in, I'm going to forget the name of the town now. It's beyond Morristown, whatever that little town is. I can't think of it.
Greenville, maybe?
No, it starts with a D, I think. Who cares?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a little town. Who cares? But supposedly there was a hotel there that was haunted. And I thought, well, this is on the internet. It's got to be true.
Yeah, that's right.
So I drove up there one day. It was during the summer. I was
Dandridge, maybe.
Dandridge. There you go. He's a great minister. Yeah, it was in Dandridge. And it was like a sleep-in or whatever, cheap little hotel. And I went up there. I had to do something else, and I was going to stop to see on the way out. And I went by the hotel, and I walked in, and a former student of mine was working at the desk. So I walked up. Yeah, isn't that a coincidence? Presbyterians are right, guys. But anyway, I went in and just kidding. And we started talking, and I told her what I had read about the hotel, and she was laughing, and she goes, "Well, it's on the internet, then you know it's true." And we laughed. And she said, "I need to step out a minute. If you'd like, come on out here and we can chat." So she goes outside. I go out with her, and she says, "I can't talk about this on camera." And I said, "That's one of my favorite sentences to ever hear." And she laughed. And I said, "So talk to me." And she said, "I've seen him."
Yeah.
And she said, it was a guy on a bicycle who apparently got hit in traffic, and it killed him. And he was staying at the hotel when he was out riding his bike. And she said, "You see him, and often you see the bike as well." Now, I don't know how that could possibly be, but
that's fascinating. Yeah,
I hear these stories. So I was like, okay, well, I want to see him. She took the weed to where he was supposed to be. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
She didn't see anybody. I didn't either.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, it's just my luck. He's out riding today. And we laughed about it. And we're heading back to the office. And she said, I need to ask you a nosy question. And I said, yeah. And she said, I don't see ghosts much, but I'm kind of psychic. I said, okay. I can't be crazy in two different directions. I'm sorry, I only have time for one. And she said, well, have you seen her yet? I said, seen whom? And she said, the woman who is in your church.
Huh.
And I had.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I have seen her. I said, why are you asking? And she said, can you hear her? I said, no, I don't have the ability to hear them. And she said, develop it. She's trying to give you a message.
Oh.
And I thought, well, I don't know how to develop it.
Yeah.
She didn't either, because that's not something she does.
Yeah.
And she said, just try to find somebody who can teach you. And do. Well, I never found anybody, but I would go in and see her, and I could see that she was talking, but I couldn't hear any sound. And so shortly after that is when my son passed. And one day I was driving, my wife had been released from the hospital. She was at home. And I was out running some errands for her. And I dropped by the church. And I went into the room where she was. And she was still there, standing in the corner. And her head was down. And she wasn't saying anything. And then it dawned on me. And I walked up to her. And I said, I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you. I said, were you trying to warn me? And she looked up at me, and I could see her face. She looked like she'd been crying. And I said, God bless you for trying to warn me. But what would I have done with that information? And I said, thank you for what you tried to do. You'll always have a spot in my heart. But you don't have to stick around for us. We're going to be okay. And I thanked her, and when I left, I never saw her again.
Interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
And people tell me, that didn't happen. Oh, now you're going to go out and fight with me.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, come on, man.
Well, and you don't know who she was? She didn't have any connection
I
to you?
did know her in life, yes.
Oh, okay.
I did know her.
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid saying that too
that's
much.
fine.
Because I don't want her family going, wait. Sorry. But I don't ever go to a family go, I saw your relative after his death.
Yeah.
I never do that.
Yeah.
Nobody could handle that. Why would I do it?
Oh, I think that would be a gift, but
but
I'm weird that way.
Some people would think that, but most of them don't.
Yeah.
I did tell my wife I saw her son.
Yeah.
And I always would report to her.
Yeah.
And it did help her.
Yeah.
And she appreciated hearing about it.
Yeah.
So, some people want it and some don't, and I don't know how you tell.
Yeah, true.
So
I hear that.
Don't.
Yeah. It is fascinating because most people who share stories like that with me, it is very strongly connected, just in your stories of someone wanting to let you know they're okay,
right,
or say goodbye in a way,
and saying everything's going to be all right, whatever your situation is going to be okay.
Yeah,
and just let you know. Yeah. And that's why I love scary movies, because who doesn't like to be scared? But I have...
Me, for one.
You don't? Oh, I love it. It scared me to death. But I very seldom ever find it turns out that way. And I've gone on some really cool ghost hunts.
Yeah.
But it's just clinical in a way.
Yeah.
You go in and go, why are you still here? Come on, man. Get out of here.
Yeah.
It's a terrible place to spend your afterlife.
Help them sort of let go.
Well, you try to encourage them to move on. I don't know how you move them on. I hear people say that. You can't move anybody on.
Yeah.
You can pray with them, talk to them, hope for the best, but they're going to make their own decision.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and who knows, right? We're talking about things that, again, aren't really totally knowable, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know their life, right? Maybe they are scared.
Right.
They shouldn't be. I don't think there's anything over there to be afraid of.
Yeah.
As every good Presbyterian should. I don't believe in hell. I think God is infinite love, And infinite love doesn't throw people into hell. I just don't believe that.
Yeah. That's I always like to tell people, and I say it all the time, so I should look up actually which pope said this, but
Right.
I've forgotten.
Okay.
But one of the popes along the way said, they said, I do believe there is a hell, because obviously a pope would get in a lot of trouble if they said otherwise.
Right.
But he said, but it's impossible for anyone to be there. And he said because it's impossible for anything to reject the eternal offer of love of God.
Right. Well, I have a current minister who he and I have talked about this quite a bit. And I asked him after my mother died. Mm-hmm. I was mourning. Because she was my rock, as I said.
Yeah.
And I went to her funeral. It was one of those Methodist country church kind of open casket things that are designed to make you have nightmares.
Yeah.
And first thing I noticed...
The makeup alone will give you a nightmare.
I know, it's awful, isn't it? But I noticed her face did not look like my mom. And of course, part of that is jaws are slack, and she just looks bad.
Right.
And I was talking to him, and I said, "Come on now, do you really believe in an afterlife?" And he sat there for a moment, he smiled, and he said, "I'd be quite a hypocrite if I didn't at this point, wouldn't I?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I just want to check in with you." And he said, "I kind of think you believe in that too." And I said, "I do." And he said, "So what really is bothering you?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "It sometimes feels like the story we tell our children so they'll go to sleep."
Yeah.
And he said that he was a smart man and I was a smart man. And he said, "I've never known smart men to find God that way."
Yeah.
He said, it's through your heart that God comes to you. And he said, you open your heart up to have a little bit of faith, and next thing you know, you don't feel like you're going through this all by yourself. Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Right.
Sure.
And he said, "I believe your mother's in heaven." Uh-huh. And he said...
whatever that is.
Yeah.
Whatever, right.
Yeah, and he said, "I don't know what heaven's like, but I think she's there." Uh-huh. And I said, "Well, I can tell you one thing, they better be on time." And he just laughed. And when my dad died a few months later, I had a chaplain come in to talk to me because, I had a lot of complex feelings. And he asked me if I believed my father was going to heaven or hell. And I said, "Well, that's a good Presbyterian. I don't believe in hell. I think he's going to heaven."
Yeah, he didn't know how deep that question was, did he?
Right, he didn't. But he kind of chuckled and he said, "You Presbyterians mess up everything." And we had a good laugh about that. And I said, one way that helps me is if God can forgive my dad, I need to learn to do that too. Mm-hmm. And I think if I'm going to get into heaven, I need to cast away some of that anger. And he said, "Don't worry about that too much. I think God helps you with that."
Yeah.
And I think that's true.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. That's why I wrote about it. It's why I talk about it. It's why I bring it out.
Yeah.
It's the way you deal with that anger.
Yeah.
Is you make it very public. And there are people who can't talk about this.
Yeah.
I've had people start reading my book and go, "No, it's just too bad."
Right. And that's what, I'm as you're sharing too, I'm sitting here thinking, what I do comes with a lot of, I get everyone's stories, and I get the stories that they probably haven't told anybody.
Right.
And it's there are a lot more people who grow up in situations or in relationships like the one you described than most people realize.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And so the telling is extremely powerful and important.
Right.
That's what I'm saying is, if you have a story similar to this, I'm your ally.
Yeah.
You're going to find a friend here.
Yeah.
I was asked to do a speech to a statewide convention of people with disabilities right before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And my book had just come out. And the lady who asked me to come do this said that
Her only condition is I needed to talk about my book. I said, well, my book is not exactly a feel-good, let's have a party. And she said, I want something deeper than that. Mm-hmm. And so I told the Stay Out in the Snow story.
Yeah.
And I told it from the book, and I told them the 3 things I learned. And when I got through, I looked at the audience really closely, and no one was making eye contact with me. Mm. They're all looking down. Mm. And I said, I want you to know that I am not a counselor, and I can't help anybody with these issues. But my wife and I are going to be standing outside the lobby after this is over. And if you've had an incident like that and you'd like to talk about it, I'd be happy to listen. Mm. The only thing I can offer you is a handshake or a hug, mm-hmm. but I would be happy to listen. We stood out there for 3 hours. Wow. The whole room lined up. Wow. And you see all these normal-bodied people hanging out going, what are they in line for? And they would come by and tell me their story. And some of the women preferred to tell my wife, and we'd give them a hug and move them on. And I didn't get paid for that speech, and I can't tell you how much happier I was.
Yeah.
That was what we got for payment.
Yeah.
And the lady organizer came by and she said, now what we got to figure out is how do we stop it? And I said, you bring it out in the open every time you can.
That's right. That's right.
That's the way. That's the only way I know.
Yeah. And just a clarification, you said the I forgot the phrasing you were, but normal body. Did you say normal body?
Yeah.
So were all the people that came to you to talk had disabilities?
All of them. Oh. Every single one. Oh. Because it's a real problem in the disability community.
Abuse.
Yeah. I interviewed a woman on my show. I have a YouTube show called Harmon Speaks. Please go watch it. Yeah. And like it and subscribe.
That's right.
I had a lady who was visually impaired. Mm-hmm. And off camera, when we were getting prepared for it, she said, I don't want to say this on camera, but there is no visually impaired woman who hasn't been sexually harassed or raped.
Jeez.
And I sat there and I said, surely that's hyperbole. And she said, aren't you cute? And she laughed.
Yeah.
And I said, you mean this? And she said, yes.
Yeah.
And she said, I knew her. She was a former student of mine. And she said, obviously, I know you. I feel very safe here. I don't know your cameraman, but he sounds older than you, and I think you could take him. So I feel safe. But she said, ask me if I can get out of here without directions.
Yeah, yeah.
And she could. I let her do it and show me. And she could get out of the church. It was a maze.
Yeah. And
she knew what to avoid and how to get out. And she said she never goes into any place that she doesn't memorize the floor plan.
Yeah, man, you don't think about just how vulnerable,
right,
person,
right, because what are they going to do? They can't see. And I just, how anybody could do that, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, I've never thought about that.
Right, I hadn't either.
But it makes sense. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. I think it's like 1 in 3 women, period, are sexually assaulted in some way, shape, or form. So then you think someone who is pretty much defenseless, you know? Yeah.
Right.
Goodness gracious.
We sure went down dark roads.
Well, that's all right, man. This is wonderful. I appreciate you sharing with me. Just to, because I don't want to keep y'all afternoon.
No, I'm fine. But I'm in no hurry.
Well,
I promise.
So, So I just want to make sure. So one thing I always ask everybody is what is the most powerful or clear or important, again, like quote unquote spiritual experience you've ever had. Now you told my definition of spiritual is very broad. So like all of these have been to me, spiritual, but I just want to make sure you weren't saving some gem or some big.
Not really. Okay. I feel like my spiritual journey has been kind of directed.
Yeah.
And the only reason I think that was true is because now I can speak about it. Mm-hmm. And he gave me the ability to do that and to talk. Mm-hmm. So when I am meeting with groups of people with disabilities, we get real really fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I talked to an amputee coalition group once, and I went in and I was talking to him. I do basically the stories you've heard. And when I first started, I said, I'm technically an amputee, but just like everything else in my life, I cheated. And they kind of chuckled. And I said, I was born without the hands and feet, and that doesn't count. Because there's no struggle. There's just acceptance.
Yeah.
And we got into some discussion. And at the end of it, instead of leaving, they called me to come sit down with them. And one of the guys said, you stood for an hour. How do you do that? Well, I'm glad I didn't have to do that today. I'm older. But, you learn, over time. And we started talking about stuff. And there's so much commonality in our stories that it feels comfortable. You're at home. And I think God wanted me to find that. And wanted me to understand that family didn't have to just be the dad that didn't like me.
Yeah.
It could also be the mom who was my rock, and my grandparents who stood by me, and all the other mentors in my life who really lifted me up.
Yeah.
And they're in my book too.
Yeah.
And they're not great stories, but they were wonderful people who could take me by the hand and pull me up a step.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of them. And I was grateful. Most of them were teachers. So what did I become?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Teacher.
Yeah. This is not a fully formed thought because it's just coming to me here.
Okay.
But it's interesting to consider. I don't know, man. This has been coming up a lot. Obviously, in theology, this comes up a lot. The problem of suffering, like why is there suffering?
Right.
Why are there disabilities? Why, right? All these things,
Right.
And then it's a very uncomfortable spot to be in. To then also try to say, well, we believe there's this thing we call God, whatever it is, whatever that means, right? The creator, the intelligence, whatever, that loves us, right? God is love, and then it gets, and God is all good. And God knows everything, all that stuff we say about God. And then to say, but there's suffering and evil and pain and these things in the world, and how is that allowed? One possibility of that answer is that it's useful or it does something to us. It takes, that's an uncomfortable thing to consider. However, it's interesting as I hear you speak, part of what it made me consider is, because of the experiences you were having with your father and the challenges just of life, right? It's as if you had to be open, right, to that other possibility, to something greater than yourself, right? And so I hesitate to even use that word, but it like in that sense, when I look at it that way, it's like that is a gift. And then I compare that to like people that I work with or minister to all the time in a struggle, especially in Farragut, Tennessee, in Western society, in America, in today's world, where people are so ridiculously blessed and wealthy and have no worries or struggles. I know that's an exaggeration. We all do, but a lot of people struggle to ever have that level of openness. Right. And a lot of times it takes something to bring them to their knees before they, because it's all ego. Sure.
Sure. Yeah. Did you ever live or grow up on a farm or be on a farm ever?
I mean, I've been on farms, but
okay. Not, Have you ever seen a chicken hatch?
No.
Okay. We used to raise chickens, and my grandfather made sure we saw everything. He was just that kind of guy. Yeah. And we were sitting in the hen house one day when the chickens began to hatch. And that you see kind of break through the bill, the egg with shell with their bill, and they're fluttering, trying to break the egg and get out. And I said, why don't we just open it up for them? And he said, you can't do that. I said, why not? And he said, if you do, they'll die.
Really?
And I said, why would they die? And he said, they won't be strong enough to survive life. They have to break their own shell. Yeah. You'll notice the mother doesn't help them either. Yeah. She watches and lets it happen. But if they can't break the shell, they're not going to make it. Yeah. And you have to let them break through on their own. Yeah. And he said, life's like that.
He said, we can feed you, we can clothe you, we can love you and try to take care of you, but the battles you fight are yours. He said, now, if it's unfair, we might be able to join you a little bit, but he said, otherwise, the battles are yours. And I think that's true. And I don't believe that's a good enough excuse. I don't know why children starve in other countries.
Yeah.
There's no answer for that. They're not learning anything. That's just cruel.
Yeah, well, the only way that makes sense is you'll sometimes hear people say that they believe that we as souls choose, that this is just an experience.
I don't know about that either.
I don't either, but that's the only way that, like, then what we're saying makes sense, you know.
One thing I read once that I thought made a lot of sense is you got this guy praying, Lord, there are children across the world who are starving. I need you to feed them. And the Lord says, they are starving, and I need you to feed them.
Yeah, right.
Now, whose job is it?
Right.
It's both of ours. And we can't just lay this at God's feet.
Right.
It's our responsibility. Now, I don't have any money, and I've never saved a starving child. My children are sweet and chubby, and they're fine. But I don't solve the hunger problem, and I don't know how to do it. I don't know how we would do it, but I think we should find a way. And I think if there is any judgment, it's why didn't you help the children who were starving?
Yeah.
Why didn't you help the sick? Why didn't you clothe the naked or feed the hungry?
Take care of the people around you. You know?
I think that's why we're here.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do all that.
Yeah.
But I can try to talk to people with disabilities and let them know that there's a tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's the piece of the puzzle I pick up.
Yeah. Right. This is getting into more theology stuff, but it's something that I talk too much about. But you know, somewhere down the line, I believe Christianity got almost, no disrespect to Paul, but got too influenced by sort of the Pauline Greco-Roman theology that's present in Scripture, and so much of Christianity is just obsessed with the afterlife in heaven, when, in my opinion, most of what Jesus was really talking about was here. Kingdom of heaven is here, at hand. You know,
I saw a movie recently called God and Country. Have you seen this? I promise you I'm trying not to get political. But in this documentary, they were talking about, if you look at the big themes of the Bible, one of the big themes comes out is feed the hungry.
Oh, sure.
Right? Clothe the naked. Support people who need it. Whether they are you, your neighbors, or foreigners. It doesn't matter. Help them. And then there are little issues, and I won't name those because you know what they are, that are barely ever mentioned in the Bible. But when we get into the political world, it's those little ones.
And whole churches have been split over those.
Split over. And it makes no sense to me.
I know.
Go feed the hungry.
I know.
Maybe it'll pull you back together as a church. Because that's important.
Well, and to me, really, that gets back to like what, to me, the heart of this show is.
Right.
Because in my opinion, what Jesus was saying and if you carry out what you just said and live in that way, what you realize is this is holy. Right?
Yes.
This conversation, this relationship with this person, this interaction with this other human being, this is holy. Right? It's not some pie in the sky somewhere. This is
and that's nice, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, and another another thing I say way too often, but it's something I really love about what the Rastafarians say. I know they're smoking weed and reading the Bible all day, but
sounds like fun to me. Let's go.
But they,
I do not smoke weed. Leave me alone. Okay, go ahead. I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
My son might be listening. No, son, put it down. I'm sorry.
You're good. So, but they are
gummies, on the other hand, we can talk about. But anyway, go ahead.
But they are very strong in a belief that we are already in heaven.
Okay.
This is heaven. And if it's not looking good,
right.
it's because we have allowed it to not look good.
Right.
And I think that's really powerful.
That's
and important.
Great thing. I love that. Yeah. I love that a lot.
Yeah.
There is a place, I'm going to do another ghost story for you.
All right.
In South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. And it's a hospital that was closed in 1990. And the belief was that it was so haunted that one of the doctors bought the building. And now if you're interested in the paranormal, you can go there and have experiences and learn about it.
Interesting.
And it is interesting. I've been there twice and absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And one night, they have a couple who live in the hospital. And their job is to make sure those who come through for it are okay and have their own experience. And they take recorders around the rooms and try to get into conversations with these ghosts. And yes, I know this is sounding crazy. Hang with me.
I love it.
He's talking to this one woman in a room. I don't know which room, but it's one of the rooms of the hospital. And he said there was nothing in the room except him, the recorder, and his wife. And they were sitting on the floor, and they couldn't really hear her until they played it back. But they were listening, and they said, is there anyone in here? A woman said yes. Where are you? So, I'm in the bed. Well, there was no bed in the room. Okay. Why are you here? She had cancer, and she was being treated for cancer. And he said, what year is this? And she said, 1972. He said, what time of day was it? It was probably about 12:30 at night. And she said, it was around noon. She was expecting her lunch to be brought in. And he said, is it cloudy, rainy, sunny? She goes, it's a perfectly sunny day. There's a lot of light streaming into the window. It's beautiful. And he said, have you seen any other people today? She said, my whole family came in. She said, I have a great family. And she said, one of the reasons I hope to beat cancer is I don't want to lose them yet. And she said, the kids were here. My husband was here. She had a mother who lived nearby who came in. And she said, and I've also seen my doctors today. And he said, okay. And he said, well, I don't know how to break this news to you, but you've passed. And you're not in the hospital anymore. And she said, okay. And she said, let me ask you a question. He said, okay. And she said, what's the room look like to you? And he said, it's empty and it's dark. What time of the day is it? And he said, it's about 12:30 at night. He said, is it warm? He said, no, it's cold. It's winter. It's cold in here. And she said, honey, you're in a dark, empty room. It's cold, and you're alone. Did I die, or did you die? Isn't that a great story, man? Yeah. I listened to this, and I said, you had to fake this. And he said, tell me how I did it. How did I fake it? It wasn't his wife's voice.
Yeah.
She was sitting right there. I could hear her. And I wasn't there when he recorded it. Yeah. I can't swear this is authentic, but it's a great thought.
Oh, yeah, totally.
How do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know?
Right.
And I didn't hear the other tape, but he claimed to have gotten one guy who said that he was in hell. Because he murdered somebody and he died of a gunshot wound. And the guy said, what's hell like? And he said, well, you're right here with me. Don't you know? That's an interesting concept. Man. It messes with your head.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I love, now this is going way down rabbit holes here, but I love, I understand that when I say these things, this is not official church doctrine stuff, but I'm open to all of that, the possibilities. And we use terminology around like souls as if these are entities or whatever, but also there are other possibilities. I mean, maybe this is just energy of all of ours that gets imprinted and replayed.
That's called the residual haunting.
Exactly.
That is
right.
Correct. Yeah.
Or and then there's reincarnation stuff that plays into this. Like, could it be more than one thing? Or like I said to you before, a lot of people in that world believe that your soul. Have you ever seen the movie Soul? It's a Disney Pixar movie.
It's
about a musician.
Yeah, I did.
But it's all that. About this stuff too.
Right.
And that
really
sort of
great.
illustrates what I'm talking about. They choose the experience that they're to have on Earth, which, I can, if I'm being more psychological, I can say, okay, but these are all really just ways that we explain to ourselves to understand suffering. And
Right.
But I love all that stuff. Oh, give me aliens, give me Bigfoot, I love it. I love it. Give all of it to me.
Whenever somebody asks me about aliens or Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, I'm like, I do only one crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's all I have time for. Do I believe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, go find them and good luck. Bring me some evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
I have a friend who swears to me he saw Bigfoot. And I'm like, yeah, sure you did. What were you smoking?
Yeah. Yeah, well, goodness.
But I think that if you're going to be a spiritual person, it's hard to shut doors and be open spiritually, right?
Yeah.
You can't say the dead never walked the earth and then treat people who are facing death. How do you do that? You've got to be able to understand it all. Mm-hmm. If you've ever been in a hospice, and I'm sure you have, you know that when it comes to the end of life, they see things in that room you don't see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Almost always.
Yep.
When I went to see my grandmother, one of the last times I saw her alive in a hospice, she was looking at the ceiling with the biggest smile on her face I'd ever seen. Mm-hmm. And I sat down by her and I just waited. Mm-hmm. And after a while, she kind of looked over and saw me and I said hi. And he went back to looking and I said, Granny, what are we looking at?
Yeah.
And she smiled and she said, can't you see him?
Yeah.
I said, no, honey, I can't. And she said, it's a choir from heaven. And I said, are they singing? And she, it's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. I said, what are they singing? And she said, Amazing Grace. Mm-hmm. I said, that's your favorite, right? She said, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know that she didn't see it.
Right, sure. And that's in a pure sort of material science perspective is going to say, well, that's neurons, fine. That's, whatever.
Right.
What's interesting these days is, now, especially like in hospice situation, we actually are seeing less of those experiences. Why? Because we help. No, because we help people die.
Right.
Which I'm not saying we shouldn't do.
Okay.
But when someone's pretty close, we give them lots of chemical assistance, right?
Right.
And so there is that. I'm going to name a couple things, especially for the audience, but and you may or may not already know of these. But if you're interested in this kind of conversation,
always.
There's a couple of things I would recommend checking out. One is a book called Proof of Heaven, and
I have it. Yeah.
Is it?
Haven't read it yet, but I have it on my desk.
He was like a lapsed Episcopalian,
right?
But he was a neurosurgeon.
Nobody's perfect.
And but he was a neurosurgeon, and he died,
right?
And came back. And what's fascinating about it is, so he tells his story, but also combats the perspective that this is all just brain chemicals, because he tells you, no, this is what was actually happening in me physically while I was experiencing this. So it's fascinating. There's on Netflix right now. There's a whole series about this sort of subject matter, which is great. After Death, which is good. And then a lot of people don't realize that there's been a lot of research about this phenomena that's gone on.
Yes.
And there's a database out there.
Yes, there is.
That you can even search, like if you wanted to know, for example, because it came up in our conversation, like if you wanted to see how many people and where they were and what their religion was have had an experience of a hell, you can find that. I forget I wish I knew the name of the database, but I'm sure it's easy to find.
The University of Virginia in Charlottesville.
I'm not sure.
And I don't remember the name of the office, but it's in After Death. They mention it.
Yeah.
And I've read some things online that they put it. And there was a movie that came by not long ago dealing with this issue. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry I can't remember the name, but they had a doctor that they were interviewing. He said, when you start telling me that you're going down a tunnel and you see Jesus, he said, I'm out.
Yeah.
He said, I don't have a spiritual side to me. I don't believe in the afterlife.
Sure.
I'm not interested. He said, but this is what got me on board. He said, I had a patient on the table, and we were doing surgery, and she died. And he said, we kept trying to revive her, trying to help her, and we couldn't. Mm-hmm. And he said, finally, I called it time of death. We were done. And as we were cleaning up, she came back. And she woke up. He said she wasn't conscious, but her heart started beating. She was not gone.
Yeah.
And he said, that's nothing. Bodies do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So he said he came in to see her a few days later, checking in on her. And she said, I just want you to know, I saw the effort you made, and I really appreciate it. And he's like, no, honey, your heart stopped. You were dead. And she said, I saw everything.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, that's not possible. And she said, you used this instrument that looked like whatever.
Yep.
And he goes, yeah, I did. And then you did this, and then you said that. And she was able to give a play-by-play about what happened when she was supposedly dead.
Yep. And
yeah, he said that's what convinced him. He said, I don't know if they go to heaven, and I don't know if Jesus wears robes.
Right.
But I do know something is happening that's not just firing neurons.
Right, that's right. And that's why I bring up that database. And if people really are interested in it, it wouldn't be hard to Google and find. But, what they learned as they started to study, they wanted to collect these anecdotal stories. And they learned pretty quickly, because they were interviewing the doctors, but they learned pretty quickly that most of the stories were with the nurses. Because the doctors aren't typically there when the passing happens.
Yeah, they're not around.
And man, there's stuff exactly like that. I remember one that stands out to me is this person passed, and not only were they able to relay everything that was going on in the room, and they said they were above, they were looking down. They were also able to relay everything that was going on in the room next to them.
Right.
Which was, I mean,
it's
just
amazing
with detail.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. One patient supposedly got out of her hospital bed and walked down the hall with the doctor who was talking to her sister. And they went into a waiting room. He was explaining why she had died, and her sister was mourning, and he was eating a sandwich, and he spilled something on his tie.
Yeah.
And she told him the next day that she was with him, and she said, did you get the stain out of your tie? And he's like, how did you know I got it? And she said, I saw you spill it, you big clumsy thing. She said, no wonder I died. You can't even eat food. And they laughed about it.
So I just, in the spirit of sharing stories, I don't have anything as near as clear or as intense as some of the stories that you've shared, which I'm very thankful for. But I will tell. No, I'm thankful for your stories.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were.
I am a big scaredy cat, though. Like, I'm fascinated with all this stuff, but I'm also, But
if you believe anything I say today, believe that it's not as scary as you think it is.
And I hear that. I hear that. I always love to explain to people, when there's an encounter with God or with angels or whatever in the Bible, it always says, and they were fearful. They were trembling.
Right.
But that's a bad translation.
Right. What does it really mean?
It's really, it's much more accurate, supposedly, that it's like awestruck.
Right. And of course you're going to be scared if you just suddenly see it.
Of course. Yeah.
If you're lying in your bed and suddenly a woman walks out of your closet.
Right.
That doesn't happen to me very often.
Yeah.
I'm a one-woman kind of guy. I don't really have a line of women wanting to be with Gary in the morning. And so that's weird, and it's going to make you jump. And
of course.
But once you realize, okay, this is what we're going through.
Of course.
You relax and see it through.
Well, I'll just share two little things. One, and now this was an experience, but it was just what I felt.
Okay.
But I'm with people when they're dying a lot.
Right.
And I went to see this parishioner. She was an older lady, wonderful soul, and she was close. You start to learn and to know when people are close.
Yeah.
And so I sat with her and I prayed with her, and then I just sat there. I'm a pretty contemplative kind of prayer. I like to sit in silence and just be and listen, you know? And that's what I was doing. And all of a sudden, I knew I could feel the 3 nurses had come into the room. It's odd because I could feel 3 people.
I understand.
I don't know why, but
you can.
And that's not. I didn't even open my eyes because it's not uncommon. Nurses come in and out all the time, and if they see me there, they will often be quiet and respect what's going on.
Let you do what you're doing.
Yeah. And I could feel them there with me that whole time. And then when I opened my eyes, there's no one there.
Right.
And I went out the door. I asked if anyone came in. I looked down the hall and nothing. You know. So that was one.
Yeah, that's good.
That was powerful for me. And then the other one, this is crazy, but I didn't experience any of this. I was just part of the story unknowingly and it was related to me. Another wonderful parishioner, she was actually right here across the street from this church at NHC, for the people who know where that is.
Right.
And I went to visit her. She had a surgery or something, I can't remember. And I went in and was trying to talk to her, and she was not doing okay. She was out of it, mentally, everything. I was like, something's not, and I just got a bad feeling. I was like, something's not right. And I'll never forget this. I was walking down the hall, you know, they got the little nurses station in the middle, you know, and I almost just kept walking.
Right.
But something was like, that's not right. So I had to say something. And so I told the nurse, and she, for all I know, she could have just blew me off. But I told the nurse, like, hey, something doesn't seem right in there, you know, whatever. Well, come to find out, next time I go to visit and I see her, they explain to me, well, she tells me that she was watching me from the ceiling and saw the whole interaction. She was crying, and she hugged me, and she said, thank you.
Okay.
Because the nurse came in and realized that she was having a reaction. She was dying.
Wow.
She was having a reaction to the medicine or something like that, or they gave her too much.
Right.
And she saw the whole thing happen.
Wow.
And she said she saw me come in there and talk to her, and that she saw me concerned, and she saw me go and tell the nurse station. And yeah. So those are 2 of my sort of most clear instances like that. But
when I walked out of my grandmother's room when she was in the hospice, I walked out into the hallway, and there was a patient in the room across. The door was open for, I don't know why, it shouldn't have been. And she was in bed, unconscious, and her back was arched with her stomach toward the ceiling, and she was actually resting on the top of her head and on her feet. And her mouth was in full scream. No sound coming out, just fully open. And I saw her, and I began to cry. It's like, oh, my God.
Yeah.
And the nurse came by, and she said, sweetheart, that doesn't happen overnight. That's a slow thing. And I said, well, how much in agony does she have to be?
Yeah.
And she said, honey, we don't kill them.
Yeah.
We just give them a place to stop. And I said, does anybody go in and talk to her? And she said, she can't talk.
Yeah.
I smacked my head. But just to give her comfort.
Yeah.
Does it? No. And, you know, I didn't know where to start. I didn't try. I didn't figure it's my family.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't. But that always stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I always wondered if she was sitting there going, aren't you going to do something else?
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. But
it's hard.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mr. Gary, yeah. I got to wrap this up. But,
okay.
Thank you again for coming and journeying with me and being open
fun.
and telling me the stories and sharing. I love it. I appreciate it. And thank you for what you do. It's powerful and important.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Tell people one more time, book, YouTube channel.
Okay. I have a book called A Clown in Cobwebs, written by Walt Nelson, WaltNelson. It's on Amazon, and feel free to read the reviews. I've been really lucky. It got very good reviews.
Awesome.
Please read the book. I also have a children's book, but I don't currently have that on Amazon. but I'll be putting it up on my website. And my website is harmonspeaks.com. Go see it. You'll see how remarkably handsome I am. So that'll give you something to look forward to. And don't look with young children. It might scare them. But my children's book is called My Daddy Takes His Legs Off. And it's about an event that I dealt with my older child. Mm-hmm. And I wrote the book so that parents will have something to help them talk to their children about disabilities. So.
Wonderful. And then your YouTube channel is also Harmon Speaks.
Yes, that's my label, my name.
Harmon Speaks. And that's Harmon.
That's correct.
Harmon Speaks.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all check it out. I saw at least one interview on there, and it was great. So
I had a friend help me come up with the title, and she says, "What else do you do?" And I laughed. I said, "That's true." I'm one of those, my wife's cleaning up. I go, "You're doing a great job. That looks really, why don't you get up off your bottom and help me?" "Well, I'm just thinking you're doing great." And, that's not going to last every day, but I try.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, y'all go check him out. Gary Harmon, great to meet you. Great to have you.
Thank you for sharing this kind of conversation with the community.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're doing a great job, but
thanks,
I'm honored to be a part of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. Well, let me know if you ever will come back, and we'll do it again.
I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.